Today, we are joined by someone who understands ambition, adversity, and resilience on a level most people rarely speak about openly. James Lang is a serial entrepreneur who has built and scaled companies generating over 20 million in direct to consumer revenue. But behind the accomplishments lies a chapter many high achievers quietly carry. The moment life demands a full stop. James stepped out of the fast lane where a medical situation forced everything to pause. And instead of fading from his field, he returned sharper, wiser, and more unstoppable than before. Today, we explore what it truly means to rebuild your momentum, identity, and purpose after everything has been interrupted. Welcome to the show, James. It's such an honor to have you.
Anya, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to share my experiences. The wiser part, I'm not so sure everyone I know would agree with you, but I will say that I certainly think there's a well of wisdom to draw upon that you might not have if you lack the life experiences, because that's how life works. We learn, and either we keep learning the same lessons, or we experience something so unique and so profound that it changes us. There's something different about how we look at the world, how we engage, and what we seek to build or deliver. So, definitely experience one of those moments, and happy to unpack that with you. But again, thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And James, when life suddenly forces you to press pause, especially at a high level of performance, what did that moment of stillness feel like for you?
Well, for me, there were two moments. There was one moment where I woke up to an email from a group of shareholders that were fighting over control of the company. And as the chief operating officer, I was put in the unenviable position of kind of being in the middle. I was the key holder. I could give or remove access to different shareholders, and I was receiving conflicting instructions from different groups. In fact, some people didn't even know this hostile act was occurring. What I believe I'm learning, I'm not an expert, but from following the legal proceedings that resulted from this, that continue to go on, the only comment I can make is it appears that the group that was attempting to hostilely take over the company were acting in a gray area of the law at best. And anyways, my response, you can imagine waking up to this kind of email that says basically, don't talk to anybody, you're to do these things, these are your directions, all of that. You have really three choices. You can do what they're asking you to do. You can say no and let everyone else know that they're being attacked, or you can walk away. And just because I didn't really want to spend the rest of my life in depositions and legal proceedings and everything else, and there had been so much other drama in the company. I walked away. It was really hard to do, because you do get kind of addicted to the rhythm of life, the fast pace. When you're running an organization that's scaling rapidly, that's dealing with what I like to call torpedoes in the water. There's always challenges, things you're trying to dodge, things that you're trying to make better, and also trying to take care of your people first and foremost, so that you have a team. You've gone to all the effort of gathering all these great people, but, the last thing you wanna do is burden them with the drama that's happening, up above them on the shareholder level. So, trying to protect the team, trying to achieve goals, trying to make a choice that would allow me and give me freedom in life to do the things I want to accomplish without being slowed down or entangled in a legal proceeding. I made the difficult choice to walk away. So that was one pause moment that I wasn't expecting, where it felt like the world went from like 150% volume all the time to turn down to 0. And, that's kind of a jarring moment. But the other one, and the one I think is even more relevant to what you're asking, is about a year and a half after that, or I'm sorry, about 6 months after that, um, I suddenly started to experience chest pain. And, so I went to the hospital. I thought, oh my God, I'm having a heart attack. Well, it turns out that, because I was born, so my family, it's important to understand, I was a Navy brat, and we were stationed over in Guam. And Guam, at the time, and maybe still to an extent, is kind of a backwater in the Navy. It's not It's not a very well-developed island, or it certainly did not have very advanced medical systems on the island. So what was supposed to happen is if the Navy suspected that a pregnancy was gonna be complicated, they were supposed to move the mother to, Hawaii or Tripler, where they have more advanced medical care. The doctors in Guam dropped the ball, don't have a lot of nice things to say about them, but, anyways, I was born there, and, as a result of the traumatic injuries that occurred shortly after my birth, as they tried to figure out kinda duct tape and, glue solutions together to kinda make things work while they medevaced me to Tripler, it turns out, fast forward, 35 years later, that there were all these structural issues inside of my GI system, my esophagus, airway, and lungs that all kind of culminated together at this point in my life to where, I describe it almost like there's a beach ball inside of your chest. It's like this pressure builds up and you're not sure how to get rid of it. And so it just so turned out I moved to Denver after I left Launch Medical. And uh, it just turns out that in Denver is one of the top respiratory hospitals in the country, National Jewish Health. And, they were able to basically do like a 3D model of my chest and understand from a cardiovascular standpoint, respiratory standpoint, and a GI standpoint, what are some of the things contributing? We don't fully understand it. I think it's fair to say because I think I'm one of one in this regard. I don't think, because it's not a common thing, because there are unique circumstances, I think they're still figuring out what the heck to call this. I tell them all the time, well, I already have a book in the Bible. I might as well have a disease named after me too. So, they don't seem to find that as funny as I do. But, the goal is to figure out how to live with this, right? And so, in this moment, okay, like I have this big pause moment professionally. And then, less than 6 months later, I have this huge medical setback to the point that I was actually exploring assisted suicide at the time, because I was in so much pain all the time. Every day it felt like there was this wave of pressure kind of expanding and growing. And so, I was at this point where I was ready to end my life, if I couldn't figure it out. I didn't want to. I wanted to live, I wanted to thrive, I wanted to achieve more in life. I wanted to spend more time with the people I love and care about, but quality of life's important. And I don't think that it's wise to stick around and be miserable because that makes you a less wonderful person. It hurts the people around you because you're less fun to be around for sure. So that there was a thought there, but also, you just kind of think about like what's really important. So thankfully, through a ton of help, and now I'm on palliative care, so I have a lot of resources and things to help me with this. Now I'm at a place where I can live with this and get back to thriving. And one of the words I go back to, one of the mottos I kind of go back to is, in life there really isn't good and bad. There's people who choose to give up or just lay down and accept things as they are. And there's people who choose to strive to be better. So striving to me is really kind of the cornerstone of what I'm trying to do in this chapter of my life. And, to go from a place where, you're leading a team of about 60 people, you're generating, about 20 million in revenue, over the course of, time in a very highly regulated industry, very competitive industry. Um, to leave that and then deal with the health challenges. And then, one of the most clarifying moments was it really told me who are my friends because so much of my life I had been building relationships based on my professional, goals. Who can help me achieve the next thing? Who can help me get this deal done? Who has knowledge in this area that I don't have? Um, and when you go through this moment where you're kind of forced to refocus, reshape your perspective, you also reach out to people, your network. And there were a lot of people who I just thought for sure would be there for me at the drop of a hat who weren't there at all. And there were others who I didn't expect to be there for me who were jumping at the opportunity to help because they cared about me a lot more deeply than I realized. So you go through this period and I hesitate to cut people out of my life, but I certainly change um my focus on where I invest my time and energy. And one of the things that came out of this period was, one of the first things I did when I thought, this might be the end for me. Um, I went out and figured out how to get an insurance policy so that, if something happened to me, the people I care about would be taken care of. And then as I got healthier, and there was a spiritual component to that too, because one of my so in addition to just happening to move to the, best city to live in if you have respiratory problems, in addition to that, just luck, if you want to call it that. It also turns out that two of my friends that I grew up with in Virginia Beach, back in high school, they live out here. They've pursued careers out here in very different areas. One is a pastor, and one is a expert in AI and big data. Um, so Elliot, I posted something kind of irrational on Facebook, and it was one night where I was in extreme amount of pain. You can imagine you're taking pain medications, you're seeking anything you can find to dull the pain, and sometimes that includes alcohol. You're trying every lever you can pull to feel better so you can get through that peak of pain so you make it to the next day. Well, it led me down a path where not only, and this is probably the first time, well, definitely the first time I'm sharing this publicly, um, but in that moment, I had a plan. I was going to end my life that night. And I posted something on Facebook. I don't have a clear recollection of these events, but what I do remember is my phone rang after I posted on Facebook. And there was this guy, Elliot. I hadn't heard from him in decades. We were friends in high school. And he says, "Hey, man, I saw something weird on Facebook. Let's talk." And we just talked and he got me through this period of extreme pain, and helped me get to the other side of it. And, it's been really great to reconnect with him and his family that he's built, and learn about his perspective on religion and faith. And what I love about Elliot and also his friend Josh, who's also a pastor, both of them, they have both the IQ to approach the IQ and the courage to approach the difficult questions and not shy away from those, but the humility to accept the fact that, generally speaking, I'm kind of an asshole, right? Like, I'm not, I'm not somebody who's, been sitting in churches, going to church every Sunday, only using the right words. And, I learned the entire English language. I grew up a Navy brat. I'm going to use all the language. Well, anyways, I get myself into plenty of trouble, but they gave me the grace and the space to approach faith and spirituality. And I'm not really sure where I stand on Sky Daddy and Jesus Camp. And, I like to say that I'm Christian adjacent. I think there's wisdom in the Bible. I think it's covered in a bunch of mud and, there's layers of retelling and translations that have occurred. And, as somebody with a marketing background, our job is to figure out, how do we reduce friction? How do we make it easier for the consumer to understand what we're trying to communicate to them? And it feels to me like the Bible is like a website that was coded in 1990 and hasn't been updated since. And it's like your fault that you don't understand it. It's like, what are we doing here? Why aren't we making this easy to understand? Why aren't we democratizing the information? And so, um, you know, fast forward to the other area of my life, which is my professional career now. I'm fortunate to be in a position where, I don't have to figure out how to pay for lunch tomorrow. I have space to do things that matter to me. So what I what I ended up doing, so, I told you about Elliot, and he's my a very good friend. But he loses the contest to my buddy Jeff, who's my best friend from high school. He and I made Eagle Scout together and Boy Scouts, so I guess I'm not that bad. But anyways, we reconnected here as well, and he shared with me his journey of learning about AI and big data, which is something I didn't have a ton of experience with. I was focused more on direct to consumer med tech, but it turns out that Jeff's been working on this stuff since like 2014. So like before it was cool. And there's so many people on LinkedIn right now who claim to be like AI experts. And, last week they were experts in real estate. The week before that, they were experts in Bitcoin. You know, to anybody can say they're an expert. there's a lot of noise out there around these trending topics like AI. But it's really exciting to work with people who are genuine experts and be able to help shape the focus of their work, their knowledge, their expertise in a way that I think is going to continue to help American businesses compete. So one of the things that's really important to me is, I told you I got that insurance policy to make sure the people I care about are taken care of. Then uh, I've actually structured Overlaying Venture Partners, which is our company that Jeff and I own 50/50. I structured it so that number one, there's a succession plan if something happens to me tomorrow. I mean, anybody can get hit by a bus. It's not like, this isn't something every founder should be thinking about. But we have a succession plan in place. We have redundancies in place. But what we've built is a system where the things that I'm putting my time into and my energy into, if I go somewhere tomorrow, not only is there that insurance policy, but also my family inherits the equity in this overarching project that we call Overlaying Venture Partners. So I know I've done a lot of talking here. Is there anything specifically you want me to unpack further, or I can just keep going? Yeah,
Um, you can keep going if you want, but like your insights speak to something so many people feel but rarely admit. That stepping back can be more disorienting than moving forward.
I agree. Yeah, I think we get comfortable in our, I call it the daily hum, the rhythm of life. It's easy when you have a routine to ignore the things, the problems in the corner. And so, excuse me. So when you have that moment where the volume gets turned down and suddenly there's not a lot of noise, but there's a whole lot of signal. When you give yourself that space, and so one of the things I do now, from this perspective, I really spend time um kind of meditating, or I guess my version of meditating. I've gotten into this rhythm, especially the past few days. Sleep's difficult for me because I experience pain at different hours, but I've tried to establish this rhythm, and I've kind of established it over the last couple days at least. Who knows if it'll still be here tomorrow? But I try to wake up around 7 a.m. and the first thing I do is I take my dog for a walk, and I'll listen to music, but then I come back and grab a shower, get ready, and it used to be back in my previous professional career. The minute I woke up, I was looking at my phone, I was putting out fires, just diving in. In this phase of life, in this season of life, I really reflect on creating space. So, while I'm out working out, yeah, okay, I'm gonna listen to music because it just makes it easier because walking's kind of boring and I'm too fat to run. So, you know, uh but when I come back, there's a period. So I don't start my day until noon. So even though I'm up at 7 and I go for a workout, then I grab a shower, do all the things you do to get ready. I generally don't actually start work until noon or have meetings until noon. And that gives me space to reflect. And there's two kind of core principles that were relevant in my previous life and this life, if you want to look at it that way. Uh, learn and earn. So if you can stay tightly focused on what are people paying people to do? How do I deliver that? And then while you're delivering it, why are they paying me to do this? So that's the approach I've taken with AI. And again, there's a ton to unpack there, but I won't bore you. And then the other piece is thinking on paper, because we have these meat computers in our head that are incredibly unreliable. There's a reason if you listen to like Neil deGrasse Tyson, he'll talk about the worst thing you can do in court is bring an eyewitness in, because an eyewitness is often wrong. And even though we all experience the same thing, we probably take away different things and different perspectives. And where I used to live in Anaheim Hills, California, um, there's the Nixon Library, the presidential library. And there's things about Nixon I like, there's things I don't, right? Like I try to approach life in that way. Like there's good in everyone, there's good in everything, there's also bad. Um, but one of the nuggets of wisdom I took away from my experience going to that library a few times is Nixon kept this collection of yellow legal pads. And so here's the president of the United States who's dealing with all the pressures of his office, But his most important time was with himself in those legal pads, writing down his thoughts, unpacking the events of the day, unpacking his perspective on, the future events. So when he, rolled into his office the next day or got his day started, he wasn't relying on just a bunch of information up in his head. He was actually working off of a database of knowledge and perspective that, whether it was right or wrong, at least it was unpacked and at least it wasn't stuck in his head. And it gave him mental space to work on the day's challenges, but from a place of processing. Because when we go from thinking about something to writing it down, we slow down the thought process as we're writing it down, but also we figure out other questions we hadn't thought of because now we're visually engaged with it. And the act of writing it down processes it through our brain a little bit differently. So I'm told. And so I've found that I can be a much more effective thinker, leader, you know, act more strategically in business and personal life, and achieve goals. If you're a goal oriented person, you really can't sleep on this strategy. It will change your life. And so for me, I use Google Docs and Day One, which is a journaling app. The only reason I use Day One is because even though I have a lot of Apple devices, I also have Microsoft Android devices, and Day One is platform agnostic, so it works on everything. So you have to create data in life, and that again parallels, things I could talk about with AI and big data that I'm learning in this current venture. But the the most important thing is to create a record, to create information that you can refer back to, because 9 times out of 10 you're going to forget something or you're going to misremember something. And when those things occur, it's a handicap for you and it's an advantage for whatever problem you're trying to solve. Is going to prevent you from solving it as quickly.
Yeah, that's amazing. But also, now that you're operating at the top of your field again, what philosophy or mindset shift from your medical journey still guides you the way you work today?
Well, I think top of my field would be an opinion, and I appreciate that. But I think others would disagree. Some would agree. I'll take it, but with humility. Uh, and we really haven't unpacked what the field means on the in this conversation. Happy to do that in a moment. But what I think my biggest takeaway from going through this, and it's so relevant to every aspect of life, is to figure out what was going on with my lungs and my GI system. To understand that when I exhale, my trachea collapses. So that's part of the issue. It's not like, oh, you have asthma. It's this whole other thing that is pretty unique. To understand all of these things, I had to go to a whole team of experts. Doctors work in teams because you go to a doctor that kind of oversees everything overall. Then you go to the cardiologist. Then you go to, in my case, 3 different pulmonologists, including a surgeon. Then you go to the GI doctor, and you go down all these different rabbit holes. But what I realize is, even though these people have incredible amounts of education and knowledge in a particular area, none of them are collaborating in the best way. You have to manage your care. You have to be the advocate in the room who, my experience as a leader in a more startup slash corporate space, you learn how to be the dumbest person in the room and get out of the way when smart people are talking and connecting, but participate and focus the conversation with the right questions in the right at the right time. And so if you're keeping track, if you're on top, if you're making sure you understand not only the words they're telling you, but what those sentences and paragraphs mean, and you're okay being dumb, you're okay asking the dumb questions. If you can pull that out, especially in a group setting where you're trying to achieve a goal together, if you can ask the right questions in the right way at the right time, you can catapult the team forward towards solutions that deliver better results. And for me, that was a huge difference between my experience tackling a medical issue that's pretty complicated and kind of unknown, and what I've heard from other people and what I've witnessed with other family members going through other types of things. It really comes down to your willingness to be the organizer in chief, not the most knowledgeable. There's plenty of knowledge out there. There's plenty of experts out there, some real, some not. But if you can, if you're learning at every phase, you're going to stay closer to the truth as a group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I absolutely agree. So, James, thank you for bringing depth, honesty, and clarity to a story so many people live but rarely speak about. Your journey reminds us that a pause is not the end, it's a reorientation, a refinement, and often the catalyst that shapes a stronger version of who we are becoming. And to everyone listening, if your life feels interrupted right now, let this conversation be your invitation to breathe, regroup, and trust that momentum is never lost, it's rebuilt. Take one aligned step today, however small, and watch your path begin to open again.